Hello. So in this writing notes video, we're going to be talking about delivering positive or neutral messages. This is going to be a two-part video. In the second part, I'm going to go to a screen capture video, and we're going to look at an actual example of a neutral message, and we're going to see how that structure works. But first, I want to talk through a couple of goals for positive or neutral messages and a couple of things to keep in mind. So basically, with positive or neutral messages, there are two major goals. The first is to convey all of the information that the reader needs. So that may be directly informing them of something, that may be asking a question, that may be posing a request, that may be providing instructions, whatever it is, but you want to give them all of the information that they need to comply with the message. So this includes thinking about things like, what kinds of details is this reader going to need? What kinds of specific, concrete information do I need to give them? Do I need to talk about prices? Do I need to talk about quantities? Do I need to talk about times? Do I need to talk about deadlines? Do I need to talk about the logistics of shipping something? Do I need to talk about, do I need to provide directions for them to drive to a particular location? Whatever it is. You want to think about all of the potential details that they might need. You also want to think about what questions they might have in order to comply with your request, and you want to answer those questions in the initial communication. So the goal here is basically to prevent them from needing to follow up. So the goal is they shouldn't have to contact you after this initial message because they've got all of the details, all of the information that they need to do whatever it is that they need to do, whatever it is that this message is asking or telling them to do. So that's the first goal, is to provide all of the information that they're going to need. The second goal is to create a positive impression of yourself, of your company, your organization, whatever it is. So you will do this obviously through things like being polite, being efficient, being professional. You'll do this through grammatical and mechanical correctness, etc., etc. You'll start the message generally with some sort of positive greeting or something like this. And so you will anticipate what kinds of things your audience will respond well to, and you will use those things. Beyond that, so those are your two goals. Convey all the information that the reader is going to need and create a positive impression of yourself. Beyond this, you generally, for routine and positive messages, want to use direct rhetoric, the direct approach to rhetoric. And I made a video on this before. You should be seeing a link for it in the top corner of this video. Possibly that side, but I think it's that side. So direct rhetoric is where you start with the main information. You give that key message right at the beginning and then provide details, explanation, information, whatever it is that goes after that. So that's what you want to do with routine and positive messages. Again, remember that business people are typically quite busy, and they don't necessarily want to read through an entire message to get the main piece of information. So you want it right at the beginning. If it's an email, even if it's a memo, you also want to think about putting that key piece of information into the subject line. So right from that beginning, use that subject line to your advantage. It's the direct approach. The other thing that you want to think about is that most messages, in order to feel complete, are going to have an opening, a body, and a closing. Now we're going to take a look at a sample business message. And we're going to look at the opening, the body, and the closing, and we're going to see how each of these three components of the message plays a specific part.
All right. So as I just said, when we write routine or positive messages, we use a three-part structure of the opening, the body, and the closing. Now I've got here a sample message, and this is a routine message. As we'll see, this is asking for an employee to fill out paperwork. Now I've set this up in memo format, but this might be an email, this might be some other kind of communication. The basic structure is going to remain the same. However, what I do want to draw your attention to is this subject line. And the reason for that is because the subject line, as we've seen in other videos about formatting memos, formatting emails, the subject line is incredibly important, especially when we're using the direct approach as we do with routine and positive messages. So the subject here is submit travel paperwork to HR by 5 p.m. today. So that actually basically gives the reader, which in this case is Tomoko Tsukayaki, or Tsukazi, sorry, actually gives Tomoko the information that she needs to basically comply with this message. It doesn't give her all the details that she needs, but this subject line tells her precisely what this message means to convey. So that's really important. Again, when you're thinking about subject line, you want to be thinking about conveying the core piece of information. Now, as we move into the message itself, we started with an address, Miss Tsukazi. That's not necessarily crucial for memos, but for routine or positive messages, you typically want to be polite. You want to be somewhat personal. Again, just because it's going to set the reader at ease. So if we look at this first paragraph, this is the opening. In the opening, you want to do three main things, or you want that opening to have three major characteristics. The first is that you want it to be polite and tactful. The second is that you want to acknowledge that you're likely asking someone to do something. And people generally prefer not to have to do something if they don't need to. So, if you're asking someone to do something, it's likely an inconvenience, even if only a moderate one. But you want to acknowledge that inconvenience. And then, as always with business communication, you want to be specific and direct about what you're asking. So, if we take a look at this opening paragraph, it's generally polite, it's generally tactful. There's nothing in here that's critical or accusatory or whatever it is of the reader. It doesn't necessarily go out of its way to be super, super polite, but we do have a basically nice paragraph here. One of the things that you may note is this phrase right here. I know you're likely still jet lagged, but could you please send the relevant forms, etc., etc. So that phrase, I know you're likely still jet lagged, the purpose of that phrase here, exclusively what that does is to acknowledge that this is likely inconvenient for the reader. Miss Tsukazi is probably not really in the mood to do this paperwork. And by saying, I know you're likely still jet lagged, the writer acknowledges that. So that's going to, again, help put the reader at ease because it shows consideration for their situation, their particular concerns, and the fact that they're likely not that keen on doing this task. Now, if we look at the rest of that sentence, but could you please send the relevant forms and all receipts to John in HR before the office closes today? Again, this is specific and direct. So those are some of the key principles of business writing that we've talked about before in previous videos. We're asking for relevant forms and receipts. So that's the detail. That's what we're actually asking her to turn in. It's going to John in HR, so that's telling her where these forms need to be sent, and before the office closes today. So that gives a time frame. So again, we've got specific, direct details. So that's what the opening does. As we move on to the body has a couple of specific tasks it's supposed to do as well. The first is to provide any additional details. The second is to provide any necessary justification or explanation for the message itself. So for the request, for the announcement, whatever this routine or positive message is, if there's anything that needs to be explained or elaborated upon, the body is where you do this. And then if you can, this is a really good strategy. So if you can identify benefits for the reader of complying with whatever it is that this message is asking, that's a really good strategy. So if we look at this body paragraph, and it needn't be just one paragraph in a message, but in this case it is. Partially because I wrote this example specifically to illustrate the opening, body, closing structure. So we've got this first sentence. Before HR can put in any claim, they need Form PR-18 filled out and turned in with all receipts for travel, lodging, and food. So again, this is establishing additional details. So in that opening paragraph, we had a reference to relevant forms and all receipts, but here we've got more information, more concrete detail. So we now know that it's Form PR-18 and all receipts for travel, lodging, and food. So we have some more specific information we've gotten here about what Miss Tsukaze needs to turn in. The second portion, the first clause of the second sentence, not only does this help us keep our records up to date. Okay, so this is an explanation of why this is important, why it matters that Tomoko complies with this. She needs to do this in order for the company to keep their records up to date, which is, we could explain to her why that's important, but it's probably not crucial to give that explanation. This explanation is probably in itself enough. But then we move on to the last section of this paragraph. But the quicker payroll can process the claim, the quicker you will receive your money. So this is a very direct explanation of Tomoko's stake in complying with this. If you do this quickly, if you do this by 5 o'clock today, payroll will process the information and you will get your compensation quicker, which is presumed to be something that she would want. I've applied for travel funding for things before, and it's better when you get it quicker than if you wait weeks or something like that. So in this paragraph, we've given more information about what she needs to do, and we've explained why she needs to do this, both from our perspective as the writer and from her perspective as the person being asked to comply. So that takes us to this final paragraph, the closing. And the closing, once again, has some specific things that you want to achieve. One is you want to be clear about deadlines and other specifics. The second is that you want to include contact information, either for yourself or for the person that this reader actually needs to be in contact with to comply with the message. And then lastly, you want some sort of gesture where you thank the reader or something personal to wrap up. So we've got here specific contact information for John Smith in this case, which is the person that Tomoko would need to drop the forms off to. So we learned that his office number is 31 and his email address is jsmith@zapcore.com. So if she needs to contact him, she has that information. If she has any questions, any follow-up issues, any concerns, if she wants clarification, she now knows how to do that. Then we've got this second sentence. Please drop off the completed forms and receipts by 5 p.m. today or make other arrangements with John. So again, this is a details sentence. Now we're not reiterating in this case that it's form PR-18 and the receipts for travel, lodging, and food, but we are again establishing some details, particularly the deadline of 5 p.m. today. Now, if you look back to the opening paragraph, it said, before the office closes today. So that might tell her 5 p.m., but 5 p.m. is a more concrete deadline. So again, by this point, she should know exactly what forms she needs to fill out, who she needs to return them to, how to return them to that person, and the time by which she needs to do that. And then this last sentence. It's been nice working with you, and I hope to hear all about your trip next time we see one another. This is a good closing line. It's personal, it displays an interest in the reader, and it makes some sort of individual connection. So this is likely to send the message to the reader that this writer cares about them and is interested in them. Now that may or may not be true. Anthony Rustikov may or may not be interested in actually talking to Tomoko Tsuzaki, but it doesn't really matter because the point is that this is an ending designed to basically thank the reader, but not necessarily thank them as such. It's designed to leave on a positive personal note, which is going to be an effective technique for making that reader feel engaged. So again, you've got a 3-part structure to a routine or positive message. One in which you open the message. Basically, the key thing here is to acknowledge that you're asking someone to do something and start giving them some information about what you're asking them to do. Then in the body, you're going to provide more details and explanation for the request or the announcement, the decision, whatever it is. And then in the closing, you're going to make sure that any specific details that haven't already been established are established. You're going to give them the contact information if they have any further questions or need more information. And you're going to leave them with something positive, basically thanking them for complying with the message.